They didn't expect this pain, did they? They thought silence meant surrender. They believed time would heal them, not expose them. Most people do. And that's the problem. We've been taught wrong. You've been told that if you walk away, quietly you lose, that if you don't react you must not care, that if you're silent you must be broken. But what if I told you that silence isn't weakness, it's a weapon, that time doesn't always heal, it haunts, that by saying, "Nothing, you say everything and more"? Think about this for a second. Have you ever been told to just let it go, move on, say your piece? That closure requires communication. That strength means standing your ground in a loud and messy argument. These are comforting lies, convenient myths, and they keep you trapped in cycles of chaos with people who never deserved your voice in the first place. Here's the truth that no one tells you. Silence and time, when used with wisdom, don't just protect you. They transform you. They torture those who once underestimated your worth. They are not passive responses. They are active forces of nature, moving through the lives of those who mistook your love for weakness, your stillness, your distance, your refusal to engage. They create echoes louder than any scream. And time amplifies every one of those echoes. This isn't about revenge, it's about revelation. It's about realizing that some people don't deserve your reaction. They deserve your absence, and what happens next, the unraveling, the regret, the haunting, that's not your burden. That's their storm to weather. So if you're sitting in that silence right now, wondering if you're doing the right thing, wondering if it matters, wondering if they even notice, let me tell you something. They do. More than you know, but it's not instant, and that's why this message is urgent, because the pain they feel doesn't come at the beginning. It builds slowly, steadily, powerfully, and when it hits, it won't just sting, it will transform them, just like your silence transformed you. What you're about to discover is how to wield that silence, and how to let time do what only time can. You're going to see how everything you didn't say becomes the loudest thing they'll ever hear. You'll understand why Stoicism is not about being emotionless. It's about choosing the right emotions at the right time for the right reasons. And in relationships, especially Stoic relationships, that discipline becomes your greatest freedom. Stay with me, because what comes next is the shift. The moment where silence stops being something you endure and becomes something you master. And when you reach the final part of this journey, when regret blooms and obsession takes root in the ones who let you go, you'll finally understand the power you've been holding all along. So don't scroll away, don't pause, don't blink. You're not just watching a video, you're stepping into your strength. And by the end of this, silence won't scare you anymore. It'll set you free. 1. The power of walking away without words. There comes a moment when words no longer serve you, when every explanation feels like a plea, and every sentence becomes another opportunity for your truth to be twisted. You've been there, haven't you? Standing in the ruins of a conversation that never really changed anything, watching someone nod while they barely listen, crafting your thoughts with surgical care only to be met with indifference, mockery, or worse, manipulation. That's when the Stoic inside you wakes up. That's when something deep within you says, enough. Not because you've run out of love, but because you've run out of illusions. Walking away without words doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. When you decide not to engage, not to perform emotional CPR on someone who repeatedly flatlined your feelings, that's not giving up, it's waking up. Think back. How many times did you explain yourself, hoping this time they'd finally understand? How many times did you think, if I just say it the right way, they'll finally get it? And how many times did it leave you more exhausted, more unseen, more empty than before? That's not communication. That's self-betrayal in disguise. And when you finally walk away in silence, it's not because you have nothing left to say. It's because you've said everything you could, and they still didn't hear you. Stoicism teaches that we are not responsible for the understanding of others, only the clarity of our own intentions. And sometimes the clearest message you can send is to say nothing at all. That's where your power lives. In a world where everyone is yelling to be heard, your silence becomes a thunderclap. It forces reflection. It stops them in their tracks because they can't argue with silence. They can't twist what you didn't say. They can't gaslight a stillness that refuses to bend. And here's the twist. They expect you to react. They feed off it. They've grown used to your emotion, your effort, your attempts to salvage something that was slowly starving you. But when you walk away without a scene, without a speech, without a single word, you take back every ounce of power they thought they had over you. You reclaim your energy. You redirect it inward. You don't slam the door. You simply stop holding it open. That's the essence of Stoic relationships: presence without performance, boundaries without blame, dignity over drama. Imagine the first day they realize you're not coming back, not with a message, not with closure, not with a desperate reach for resolution. At first, they're smug. They think they've won. They tell themselves you're sulking, that you're weak, that you'll crack. But time begins to stretch. Days become weeks. Your absence doesn't just linger, it grows, it expands into their mental space, filling every silence with questions they can't answer. That's when they begin to panic. That's when they realize you didn't walk away for attention, you walked away for peace. And peace, real peace, is unshakable. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't beg to be understood. It simply arrives, and with it comes a new you. The version of yourself that no longer chases closure because you've become the closure. The version that doesn't scream to be seen because you've stopped investing in blind people. This is the moment your silence stops being a retreat and becomes a revolution. And let me ask you, what would it feel like to no longer explain your worth? To no longer perform for people who only listen to their ego? What would it feel like to finally live in alignment with your truth, instead of constantly compromising it to soothe someone else's dysfunction? That's what silence gives you. That's what walking away without words does. It gives you back to you. You're no longer a character in their narrative. You're the author of your own. And it doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring for yourself more. It means you stop negotiating with people who benefit from your confusion. It means you stop asking for validation in spaces that have already invalidated your soul. That's not cruelty. It's clarity. And here's the secret they never saw coming. When you go quiet, when you walk away without a fight, you create a vacuum. And nature, as well as human ego, hates a vacuum. That silence you leave behind, it begins to speak for you. It starts echoing in their mind. Every unanswered question becomes a scream. Every memory becomes a mirror. They start to remember everything you once said, now that you're no longer saying anything. That's when regret begins to settle in. That's when your silence becomes louder than all the noise they ever made. You don't need to block them, bash them, or post cryptic quotes. You simply disappear. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. And that's the most stoic response there is. Because stoicism isn't about emotionlessness, it's about emotional mastery. It's not that you feel nothing, it's that you decide what deserves your emotional investment. And not everyone does. Especially those who turned your heart into a battleground. Especially those who made you question your sanity just for asking for the bare minimum. Walking away without words is not the end of the story, it's the beginning of your own. And no, it won't always feel easy. Some nights your silence will ache. Some mornings you'll reach for your phone out of habit. But in those moments, remind yourself, silence is not the absence of communication. It is a message in itself. A message that says, I'm done explaining why I matter, a message that says, I've remembered who I am, a message that echoes louder with, every day you stay gone. And while they sit in the space you used to fill, wondering when you'll break, wondering when you'll return, they'll begin to understand that the version of you they had access to no longer exists. That version evolved. That version stopped. Bleeding for people who never brought bandages. That version outgrew the need to convince someone that love doesn't mean control. That's the power of walking away without words. It's not about proving anything. It's about preserving everything that makes you whole. And when you do it, not impulsively, not in anger, but with calm certainty, you shift the balance. You no longer orbit them. They begin to orbit the memory of you, and over time they realize the silence they thought meant nothing actually meant everything. It meant it was over. It meant you had healed. It meant they had lost something rare, and that no amount of noise could bring it back. You see, in Stoic relationships, silence isn't absence. It's presence with purpose. It's love without suffering. It's truth without trauma. And if that makes others uncomfortable, so be it. Your peace is not up for debate. Your silence is not a gap to be filled. It's a boundary, a border, a declaration. And the ones who truly cared, who truly saw you, they never would have pushed you to that point. The rest, let them sit in the emptiness they created. Let silence and time do what you no longer have to. Because when you walk away without words, you don't just change the story. You close the chapter with grace and leave behind a silence that speaks forever. 2. Time becomes the truth teller. Time is the one witness that never lies. It sees what we pretend not to. It hears the thoughts we try to silence. While silence is the blade, time is the hand that drives it deeper, not in malice, but in clarity. Time doesn't ask for permission. It reveals what is. It strips away the illusions people hide behind when your presence was still in the room. At first they're fine. They scroll. They smile. They convince themselves that your absence is a phase, that your silence is just a tactic. They tell themselves stories. She'll come back, he always does. They're just emotional. But then the days stretch longer than they thought. The silence doesn't break. You don't show up. You don't reach out. And suddenly the air around them thickens. The confidence begins to crack. The fog begins to lift. And that's when time starts whispering its truth. At first it's subtle. A memory triggered by a song. An ache when they visit a place you once loved. A pause before texting someone new because no one else really gets them like you did. Then the whisper turns into a conversation, and the conversation becomes a confrontation between them and the truth they tried to bury. You're not coming back, not because you're petty, not because you're playing a game, but because time has carried you somewhere they can't follow. You've outgrown the chaos. You've built peace where pain used to live, and they're just now realizing that time didn't help them forget you. It made you unforgettable. That's what they never calculated. They assumed time would dull the sharp edges of your absence, but instead, time polished the image of who you were into something they can't look away from. While they were busy thinking your silence was a void, time was turning it into a monument, one that stands in their memory, tall and silent and impossible to tear down. Because you didn't leave in a storm, you left in stillness, and time honors that kind of departure. It stretches the silence into a story, a timeline they can't rewrite, a sequence of missed chances and moments they can't undo. Every hour they don't hear from you becomes another hour they sit with themselves. And that's the real consequence, not losing you, but being left with only themselves. See, time doesn't punish with noise. It punishes with playback. It replays every moment they ignored your voice, every time you forgave more than you should have, every look you gave that said, "I'm hurting," while they stared right through you. Now time replays it all, not for you, but for them. And It doesn't fast forward, it doesn't skip. It forces them to sit through it all in slow motion. That's what makes time such a merciless teacher. It doesn't need revenge, it doesn't scream, it just continues, unstoppable, unapologetic. And when paired with your silence, it becomes something far more powerful than any argument could ever be. It becomes the mirror, the one they can't smash, the one that shows them slowly where they went wrong. That's why Stoicism values time as a weapon, not to hurt others, but to protect the self. Time gives you the distance to heal, to rebuild, to become, and it gives them the space to see who you truly were, now that you're gone. They thought they had time to waste your love, your loyalty, your effort, but they never considered that one day time would turn against them. That instead of cushioning the loss, it would calcify it. Instead of softening the blow, it would repeat it, day after day, until they can no longer run from what they let slip through their fingers. This is where you see the power of Stoic relationships. You didn't need to remind them. You didn't need to punish them. You didn't need to stay. You just needed time. Time does what your voice couldn't. It explains without speaking. It punishes without malice. It teaches without preaching. And that lesson, it's permanent. Because it isn't just about missing you. It's about realizing they'll never have access to you again. That the person who once made space for them has now filled that space with self-respect. And that realization doesn't come all at once. It grows. It unfolds. It hits hardest in the quiet hours, the unshared sunsets, the moments where they want to tell you something and can't, because now you're not just gone, you're unreachable. And that's a truth they can't unlearn. So ask yourself, what would it look like if you stopped interrupting their lesson? What would happen if you let time do what your words could not? Could you trust the process enough to remain still? That's where your transformation begins. That's where Stoicism becomes your lifestyle, not just your mindset. You understand that your presence was a gift, and now your absence is the consequence. Time will deliver the message for you. You don't need to rush. You don't need to prove. All you have to do is continue becoming who they can no longer reach. And as time moves forward, so will you. Not with resentment, but with reverence. For your peace, your growth, your future. And if this part resonated with you, if you've seen the truth time has revealed, if you're living proof that silence and time are the ultimate allies, then like this video, drop a comment with number 1 and subscribe. Because this story isn't over yet. The next chapter is where silence becomes a weapon. Stay with me. 3. Silence as a psychological battlefield. There are battles fought with words, and then there are those fought in silence, internal, relentless, and far more destructive than any shouting match. Most people are prepared for noise. They're prepared for arguments, for accusations, for tears, for doctor slamming and dramatic exits. That's the battlefield they know. That's where they've learned to win, by deflecting, distracting, defending. But what they aren't ready for, what shakes them at their core, is the kind of silence that doesn't wait for their side of the story. A silence that isn't passive but deliberate, strategic, stoic, because in Stoic relationships, silence isn't what you use when you're out of options. It's what you choose when you've mastered yourself. It's what you use when you no longer seek understanding from someone committed to misunderstanding you. Silence, when chosen, when intentional, is terrifying for the other person. Why? Because it removes control. It removes the game. It removes the script. They can't win arguments that don't happen. They can't twist words that aren't said. They can't bait you when you refuse to bite. You become unreadable, and in that unreadability, you become untouchable. You shift the entire dynamic from chaos to clarity, from reaction to sovereignty. They expect a message, a meltdown, a breakdown, a signal that they still matter, but you give them nothing, and that nothing begins to grow inside them like a void. a quiet they can't escape, a mirror that never blinks. That's when silence becomes the most brutal form of communication, because it leaves them alone, with their own voice, their own guilt, their own patterns, and nothing to distract from it. And what do people do when they lose the ability to manipulate your reactions? They spiral, they guess, they overthink, they begin to haunt their own minds. They try to decode what they never bothered to understand when it was handed to them directly. That's the irony. While you were open, expressive, transparent, they dismissed your feelings, ignored your boundaries, minimized your pain. But now that you've gone still, they suddenly want to know what's going on inside you. But they can't, because your silence is no longer about them. It's about you, about reclaiming the energy you once gave away freely, the clarity you once clouded trying to maintain a connection. It's about choosing peace, even when every nerve in your body still wants to scream. That's the inner war you win quietly. That's the battlefield where only the strong survive. And make no mistake, silence doesn't feel like power at first. It feels like restraint, like sitting on your hands while your heart pounds, like swallowing a truth that's burning in your throat. But over time, the silence that once felt like suppression starts to feel like strength, because it doesn't drain you, it doesn't escalate, it doesn't lower your vibration, it elevates it. And the one who once knew how to push your buttons now finds they don't work anymore. They poke, they prod, they post, they pretend. But all they get back is the sound of their own echo. That echo becomes deafening. It becomes the soundtrack of their days and the horror of their nights. Because people aren't haunted by noise, they're haunted by mystery. They're haunted by what they can't explain. And when your silence isn't cold but calm, when it's steady, not petty, it becomes psychological warfare of the highest level. It becomes the absence that points directly to their presence as the problem. They begin to feel exposed, not because you said anything, but because you stopped trying to protect them from themselves. That's the true essence of Stoicism. You're not punishing them, you're protecting your peace. You're not trying to hurt them, you're finally honoring you. And that shift, that subtle but seismic shift, changes everything, because silence doesn't give them anything to react to. It doesn't validate their narrative. It doesn't keep the door open for another round. It simply is. And in that stillness, they feel what they made you feel. Uncertain, unseen, unheard, powerless, not out of revenge, but as a natural consequence. This is not about playing mind games. This is about ending the game altogether. This is about stepping off the stage mid-performance and letting the curtains fall. And when they check the audience, there's no one left. That's when it hits them, not just the silence, but what it represents. It represents your freedom, your evolution, your final answer, because the strongest message is the one they don't expect. It's the message that doesn't arrive with a bang, but with absence. You're no longer explaining why they hurt you. You're no longer proving your worth to someone who never saw it. You've simply left the equation, and in doing so, you've rewritten the outcome. They're left solving for X in an equation you've already walked away from. That's the battlefield now. Their mind, their timeline, their memory, their regret. While you build your peace in quiet places, they're still looking for a way back in. They throw out feelers. They send meaningless messages. They post stories with lyrics that sound suspiciously familiar. But you don't respond, not because you're bitter, but because you're beyond it. You've traded the need to be understood for the freedom to be whole. That is the battlefield. You win without lifting a finger, without raising your voice, without stepping into the ring. You win by walking away and staying gone. And let me ask you this. How many times did you break your own boundaries just to keep them comfortable? How many times did you answer texts that drained you, show up when you were hurting, forgive when they didn't ask? Now imagine what happens when you stop, when you become a mystery instead of an open book, When your silence becomes a wall, they can't climb. That's the kind of power you cultivate in stillness. That's the battlefield you master when you realize your presence is no longer a gift they're entitled to. And in that mastery, you reclaim the narrative. You turn the volume down on their chaos and up on your clarity. You stop dancing to the rhythm of their dysfunction and start composing your own peace. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's not avoidance. That's elevation. And the ones who were never ready for a version of you that chooses stillness over drama, peace over performance, boundaries over begging, let them sit in that realization. Let them face what they tried so hard to avoid. Because you were never the problem. You were the mirror. And now that you've gone quiet, they're left with only their reflection. And for many, that's the scariest battlefield of all. 4. The reflection they can't escape. When the noise stops, the mirror speaks. That's the moment they never prepared for, the one where your silence leaves them face to face with themselves. See, your presence was more than attention, affection, or support. It was shelter. It was a shield that kept them from seeing the full weight of their own behavior. You didn't just love them, you softened them. You made them feel better about who they were. And now that you're gone, now that your silence fills every room, they walk into, there's nothing left to protect them from the truth, because the mirror doesn't lie, it doesn't soothe, it doesn't blink. And that's what they see now every time they try to convince themselves that they were right, that you were dramatic, that it's not their fault. The mirror pushes back. It plays the highlight reel in reverse. It shows them the look in your eyes when you were trying to hold it together. The moments you stayed when you should have left. The times you forgave what bruised your spirit just to keep the peace. They see all of it now, and they can't unsee it. That's what makes silence and time so devastating. Together, they create a stillness so loud it becomes a theater for self-confrontation. No audience, no distractions, just them and their decisions. And in that silence, the truth becomes undeniable. They lost someone who saw their soul and loved them anyway. Someone who didn't run when things got hard. Someone who gave more chances than were deserved. Someone who became the mirror they couldn't face until you were gone. And now, without your reflection to soften their flaws, all they have is themselves. Raw, unfiltered, unmasked. Imagine it, all the excuses, all the justifications, all the ways they convinced themselves they were the victim, now lying shattered. At their feet, they can't even use your reactions as fuel anymore. You've given them no storm to deflect from. You didn't yell, you didn't cry, you didn't demand closure. You simply walked away. And that silence became a blade sharper than any truth you could have spoken, because you didn't just go quiet. You removed the mirror. You took with you the one person who knew them deeper than anyone else. The one who held space for both their strength and their wounds. And now they're left holding a version of themselves they don't even like, let alone know how to live with. That's the true cost of losing someone who loved you without needing to control you. The reflection left behind is ugly, not because of how they look, but because of how clearly they now see who they were in the presence of your grace. And that vision, that internal confrontation, is what will haunt them far longer than your absence. See, Stoicism teaches us not just to accept the truth, but to embrace it, to sit with it until it stops burning and starts illuminating. You've done that. You faced the truth about the relationship. You acknowledged where you overextended, where you lost yourself trying to hold something together that was never yours to carry alone. You did your part. You showed up. You held the mirror with both hands even when it cut you. But now they must hold it themselves. And they're finding that they never really learned how, because your presence wasn't just love, it was structure. It was emotional scaffolding. It made them feel seen, and now without it, they feel exposed, vulnerable, and for some even ashamed. Not because you intended to make them feel that way, but because the contrast is undeniable. Your silence, your stillness, your peace, it throws their chaos into sharp relief. They can see how loud they were, how cold, how dismissive. And now, they don't know how to function without someone absorbing that damage for them. That's the legacy of Stoic relationships. The presence you bring becomes irreplaceable not because of what you do, but because of what you reflect. You became the light in which they saw themselves clearly. And now that light is gone. And they are standing in their own shadow. They'll try to hide from it. They'll distract themselves. They'll post curated happiness. They'll reach for temporary connections. But at night, in the quiet, when there's nothing left to scroll, the mirror is still there, waiting, reflecting, confronting, and no amount of noise can make it go away. That's why your silence is so powerful, not because it punishes, but because it reveals. You are no longer cushioning the blow of their truth. You are no longer explaining their behavior to them. You are no longer soothing their ego with your empathy. You're gone, and that's what's changing everything, because you didn't leave with drama. You didn't destroy the stage. You left mid-performance with calm. And now they're left delivering their lines to an empty room. The applause never comes. The scene never ends. The act doesn't close, and they're left wondering how it all fell apart so quietly. That's the genius of your departure. It wasn't loud, it was honest. And honest exits leave lasting echoes. So now, the reflection they avoided becomes the only one they see. And as it stares back, it whispers every truth they refused to hear when you said it with love. That they were selfish, that they dismissed your needs, that they took without giving, that they believed you'd never leave. But you did. And that silence, unapologetic, final, steady, is the loudest reminder they'll ever have. You were the mirror, and now that it's gone, they don't know how to face themselves. And if you've ever been in that space, where you realize that someone only valued you when your absence made them see themselves, then you know the weight of this truth. You didn't need to shout, you didn't need revenge, you just needed to walk away and let their reflection do the rest. So if you felt this part deeply, if you know you've been the mirror in someone's life, then go ahead, like this video, drop number 1 in the comments, and subscribe. Because in the next chapter, silence becomes more than clarity. It becomes a weapon. Stay with me. 5. Regret grows in the garden of silence. There is a kind of pain that doesn't show up immediately. It waits. It creeps in through the cracks of assumed certainty, through the blind arrogance of someone who thought they could mishandle love without consequence. Regret doesn't explode. It doesn't announce itself with sirens. It blooms slowly in the garden where your presence once lived, where your energy once lit the sky. And now, with you gone, that garden is silent. The flowers have wilted, the soil has dried, the light has dimmed, and in that stillness, in that absence, regret begins to grow. Small at first, a whisper, a shadow, a slight ache. They don't even recognize it at the beginning. They call it freedom. They laugh louder, post brighter, scroll faster. They convince themselves they're better off. But deep down, something is missing, and that something was never loud to begin with. It was quiet, constant, loving. It was you. And now, with you gone, they don't know how to fill that space. They try. They plant distractions. They water. Validation. They decorate the emptiness with substitutes, but none of it grows. Because you didn't leave a gap. They lost a world, a rhythm, a soul that matched theirs even when they couldn't admit it. And now the silence screams where your presence used to hum. That's what regret does. It doesn't punch you in the face. It whispers your name at 2 a.m. when the distractions have faded and the truth comes knocking. That's when the memories start to feel heavier than the mistakes. That's when the timeline they once controlled starts folding in on them. They thought they had time to hurt you and heal you, time to disrespect you and still keep you, time to disappear and return at will. But time, as you now understand through Stoicism, is not something to be manipulated. It's a force of truth. And now, time has partnered with silence to water the seeds of regret every single day, because the longer you stay gone, the more real it becomes that they've lost you. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, irreversibly. They thought you'd always be there, that no matter how many times they pulled away, you'd wait. But Stoic relationships don't revolve around dependency. They're rooted in balance. And once that balance tips too far, the scale doesn't reset. It breaks. So now they're waking up in the same world, but everything feels colder, sharper, more hollow. Your absence echoes through every space they try to fill. And that echo isn't silence. It's a reminder of every moment they ignored. Your presence, of every time they assumed your forgiveness was forever, of every time they laughed while you cried quietly. And now that laughter has stopped. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because the soundtrack of their life has changed. You were the melody, the harmony, the warmth, and now all that's left is static. It's a heavy thing, this realization, that they traded certainty for chaos, comfort for convenience, that the garden you once watered with your kindness now stands dry, abandoned, crumbling. And the worst part? They can't go back. Regret doesn't offer a return ticket. It offers a lesson. And lessons are heavy, especially when the person who once softened their rough edges is no longer around to ease the burden. Now they carry that weight alone, and the silence, the distance, the nothingness, they all reinforce the same truth. You're not coming back. Because you didn't just walk away. You evolved. You didn't need closure, you created it. You stopped arguing for your value. You stopped trying to earn what should have been reciprocated freely. You stopped offering softness to someone who used it as a weapon. And that shift, that moment you chose yourself, became the pivot point. The fork in the road they can't untake. The door they let close without realizing it locked behind you. That's the thing about regret. It always shows up too late. It arrives when the damage is done, when the bridge is ashes, when the voice they once ignored now speaks only in echoes. And those echoes, they never say what they want to hear. They don't offer forgiveness. They don't whisper, maybe someday. They say, this is it. This is the consequence. This is what you earned by taking something sacred and treating it like an option. So now, when they walk through life pretending to be okay, they're haunted by the parts of you they never appreciated. The way you noticed the little things. The way you held space when they fell apart. The way your energy brought warmth to rooms they didn't even realize were cold. All of that is gone. And they feel it. Not in grand moments, but in the quiet ones, the lonely ones, the ones they once thought you needed them more than they needed you. Because that lie, that arrogance, that illusion is what made them lose everything. And now they know you didn't leave out of anger. You left because the weight of being forgotten while you were still present finally crushed your soul. You left because you deserved to be remembered, seen, valued, and now they remember, but it's too late. That's the core of regret. It's not just about loss. It's about realizing the loss was preventable, that they had you and didn't know how to keep you, that they were holding something rare and didn't even realize it, and now they look around and see only weeds. The garden's beauty was never about the flowers, it was about the gardener. And you're not there anymore. You've moved on to grow elsewhere, to tend to a soil that reflects your effort, to bloom in spaces that don't just admire your petals, but water your roots. And that's what haunts them most. Not that you're gone, but that someone else may one day get the version of you they never earned, that you'll laugh again, bloom again, shine again in a world they no longer belong to. And that's the sting regret carries, that the very person they took for granted is now out of reach, living a life that no longer includes them. And no matter how many nights they lay awake, how many times they replay the moments, how many times they ask what if, the answer is always the same: too late. 6. They realize you're gone, not just silent. There is a moment far more painful than the sound of someone walking away. It's the moment you realize they're not coming back, and for them, that moment is now. At first, your silence seemed like distance, a phase, a test. They mistook your stillness for sulking, your withdrawal for weakness, your absence for a temporary pause in the pattern you always played. You see, they had a script. They were sure you'd follow it, that eventually you'd break the silence with a long message, a call, a confession, something that put them back in control. But what they failed to realize is that this silence wasn't a pause. It was the final scene. This wasn't a timeout. This was closure. And they're just now realizing that the door you quietly closed behind you isn't going to open again. That you didn't just walk out, you disappeared into a version of yourself that no longer includes them. They keep waiting for signs, for a story, a clue, a breadcrumb. But nothing comes, and that nothing begins to echo. It starts to reshape their world. The days pass and your name doesn't pop up. Your energy doesn't visit. Your presence doesn't linger. You're not just silent, you're gone. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, completely. And now they are left to sit with a truth more brutal than any argument could ever be. You've outgrown the version of yourself who needed them. You've healed. You've evolved. You've moved beyond the cycles that used to keep you stuck, and you did it without noise. That's what hits hardest. You didn't burn the bridge, you simply stopped crossing it. You didn't leave with a warning, you just stopped showing up. And now the silence they once enjoyed has become a sentence they can't escape. It trails them in conversations, in memories, in rooms that still carry your shadow. They thought they could handle your silence, but what they never expected was the permanence of it, because they thought the connection was stronger than your dignity. They thought your love would override your logic. But they were wrong. And now the reality is dawning, slowly, painfully, irrevocably, that they no longer get to hear from you, no longer get to provoke, to manipulate, to pull you back in. The rope you both held, you've let go. And now they're the ones standing at the edge, arms outstretched, confused, desperate, alone. And in that confusion, they start to understand that you didn't just choose silence, you chose freedom. You chose peace, you chose yourself. And the version of you that used to chase, to explain, to justify, that version no longer exists. What they're now seeing is the result of every moment you spent rebuilding yourself in the silence, every boundary you fortified, every truth you learned to honor. They're realizing that what once felt like a break is actually the ending, that what once looked like distance is really a new direction, a path that leads away from the games, the pain, the uncertainty, a path that doesn't loop back to them. And that realization, it shatters the illusions they built. They no longer get to play the victim. They no longer get to write the narrative. You didn't just stop reacting, you stopped needing them. That's what terrifies them. Not the silence itself, but what it represents. It represents your strength, your growth, your refusal to be defined by someone who never truly valued you. And that's what makes the silence deafening. Because now, every day they don't hear from you, every time they check their phone and your name isn't there. Every night they try to sleep with the hope that maybe tomorrow you'll reach out. It all begins to add up, and it adds up to a truth they can no longer deny. They lost you. Not by accident, not overnight, but choice by choice, moment by moment. And now there's nothing left to do but sit with that loss. That is the power of Stoic relationships. They are built on internal values, not emotional drama. When you walk away, you don't do it to prove a point. You do it because you've reached the point of no return. You do it because you've learned that silence isn't just a pause, it's a statement. It says you no longer have access. It says your chapter is over. And it doesn't ask for applause. It doesn't need closure. It simply is final, resolute, empowered. So they watch your silence grow into a wall they can't climb, a boundary they can't cross. And all they can do is stare at the door they assumed would always be open, knowing it's now closed for good. And if you've been there, if you're living that moment right now, know this: your silence speaks louder than any final word. Your stillness holds more strength than any explanation, and your absence, when chosen with clarity, is the most powerful message you will ever send. So if this part of the journey resonated with you, if you're ready to let your silence be your power, like this video, comment number 1 below and hit subscribe, because we're not done yet. What comes next? It's when they realize the silence they thought they controlled is now the loudest thing in their life. Stay with me. Silence isn't the end. It's the elevation. It's the place you arrive at after every word has failed, after every effort has been drained, after every illusion has shattered. It's not emptiness, it's clarity. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. In a world obsessed with reaction, validation, and noise, choosing silence is an act of rebellion, a return to the self. And in Stoicism, that return is everything, because silence is not passive. It's a power that doesn't need to explain itself. It doesn't demand permission. It doesn't seek applause. It simply is. It holds the weight of every boundary you finally honored, every part of yourself you finally chose, every wound you finally refused to reopen. Letting silence and time do the work is not about punishment. It's about truth. And the truth is, not everyone deserves to hear your voice. Not everyone earns a reply. Not everyone is qualified to hold space for your growth. So when you go quiet, when you step back, when you disappear into a life that no longer revolves around proving your worth, that's not running away. That's rising. That's becoming. That's embodying a version of yourself that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't entertain chaos dressed as love. You are not cruel for choosing peace. You are not heartless for refusing to play a rigged game. You are not broken because you didn't scream. You are strong because you didn't need to. And the ones who underestimated that strength, the ones who thought silence meant defeat, are now sitting in the space you left behind, learning a lesson that only your absence could teach. A lesson about presence, about effort, about value, about how stoic relationships don't crumble loudly. They end with dignity. So as time moves forward, let it. Let it carry you further into a life that reflects your worth. Let it remind you that the greatest transformations often happen in stillness. And let it confirm what you already know deep down, that the version of you that was once overlooked, underestimated, and unheard is no longer waiting for recognition. That version has evolved, and the silence you now live in, it's not a void. It's your sanctuary. Guard it, honor it, let it echo as proof that you remembered who you are, and that remembering is the revolution.